My name is Joyce Grundy and I'm 55. I was born in London. My parents came here in the 50s and they met actually in London, and as a result I was born. I went back to the Caribbean when I was about 2, and came back to England when I was 8. My parents then moved from London to Derby because they'd both moved up here to work at Joyces, and as a result I came here. From there, then my dad went to America and came back. I went to school in Derby, but after school I left Derby and lived in Chorley in Lancashire and Manchester, various places I lived. And then when I eventually came back to Derby in the 80s, I got involved in community work through a school friend who invited me to come down to what was called the Pear Tree Coffee Bar at the time. And I refused to go down there because I thought, no, that's not what I want to do. It's not what I'm involved in. I'm not interested, whatever. But I went anyway, and I got hooked, and got involved in community work from there. But before that, I'd done all sorts of other things, like training to be a nurse. I was training to be a nurse at one time, but I couldn't cope with it. Bodily fluid is not my thing. I was terrible as a nurse. I kept passing out all over the place, so that wasn't helpful. But no, I loved community work, and I got involved with community work. Started off as a youth worker, got involved as a youth worker, opened my eyes to a lot of issues in the community that I didn't even know existed, to be honest. And sort of exposed me to being black in Britain, because before then I wasn't sure what that meant. My dad always spoke about it because my dad was very much a person about who he was, and very proud of his heritage as a African man that ended up in the Caribbean and all of that. He was very proud of his Jamaican heritage, particularly his Jamaican heritage. That was always in the house. That was always talked about, stories and things he used to tell us about our grandparents and our family and the extension of our family and stuff like that. So my background is varied. It really is varied. I couldn't just summarize it in 10 minutes. It'll take me like 2 days to actually summarize my entire background, really. But got involved in community work. And but I was married. I've got 4 children, divorced. My husband died recently, ex-husband died recently, actually. That's it, really.
So what was it that garnered your interest in doing community work? Why did you get hooked?
I'm not sure. I'm still trying to work that out today, because it isn't the easiest of career, isn't the easiest of route to go down at all. So I'm still trying to work out how and why I ended up there. But I think it's my passion for people, especially older people, because even though I was a youth worker and I enjoyed working with young people and everything, older people was always my passion. And I suppose because when I went back to the Caribbean as a child, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. I first was with my granddad, who I loved dearly, and he was a fantastic, amazing man. But he died when I was 5, and as a result, I went to live with my grandmother on my dad's side. Again, an amazing woman. Been to Cuba and all of that, lived most of her life in Cuba and stuff like that. Amazing, absolutely amazing she was. And I think that because they were my first love affair, those 2 people were really my first love affair, because they sort of replaced my mum and dad because they weren't there. They sort of took that role. And they were my first, I would say, first real love affair. And because of that, I think I transferred all of that onto older people in Derby, and they became my passion. They became my absolute passion. So when I started youth work, and the idea came about to look at looking at the needs of ethnic minority elders in Derby, I jumped at it, and I got the job to do the research around it and everything else. And alongside that, we sort of developed the Broadway, which became the Adari. We developed the Broadway, and it was simple because people simply needed to have support. At that time, elderly African and Caribbean people, the organisations and agencies thought that people just retired from England and went straight back home, which was just such a nonsense, and we knew it was a nonsense. So we set out really to prove it all wrong, and we did. And in doing so, we realised what was needed in terms of putting some sort of service together, and addressing some of the needs in our community. And I think it was the exciting time around the 80s and the early 90s anyway, where we had a lot of young people that was involved in this. It was almost like it was an amazing time in the sense that we had new people coming into Derby that just absolutely got to the very soul and the very core of young people, and as a result we just blossomed, and we wanted to do all sorts of things then, because before that I don't think it had happened. It hadn't happened. We hadn't had a situation where young black people had all come together and decided to address the needs in their community. We hadn't done that before. And it was just such a fascinating, exciting times. And it was the first time I was realising, actually, that we were actually black. We weren't on a level playing field. We knew that, but we couldn't put a word to it because we didn't understand what that word was. That was racism, really. We didn't understand all of that. And when you had all the activists coming into Derby, Vina Winters, Letford, Milton Crosdale, Vera Pitt-Ballen, bless her soul, she died. All of these people came into Derby. It just opened the door, and all this amazing thing happened as a result of that. You know, people were prepared to set up organisations. People were going on to training. People, we just blossomed as the young black people in our community, and we decided to look at all facets within our community and address each one. And that's what we did. We were such activists. We challenged. We challenged, but we also created. You know, we broke down concept and ideas and rebuild those, so that we were part of it. I think before that we weren't included in anything. I know how our parents had done amazing work in terms of, to be honest with you, if they hadn't done what they've done, we wouldn't have had the opportunities to actually take on the mantle. And that there was the I think that there was just amazing, that transition. But it was a very difficult transition because we were the first generation to be born in this country, really. And here we were making an impact on the system, and they hadn't catered for us in any sense, shape or form. They knew we were there, but they didn't recognise what sort of impact we were going to create. And I think that sort of came through in the 80s, because we were at that age. And we wanted to change. We wanted our community to change, and we wanted to be recognised as people and as a community with needs that needs to be addressed. And we weren't going anywhere, and they had to listen, and they had to recognise who we were. And we as a community had to recognise who we were as well, because yes, our parents had come and they'd created their own community, and we were part of that. But here we were, that needed to create the extension of that would include us. because we were the drivers in that. So it was an amazing, fascinating time, and I still look at it now and think, God, I can't believe we did all of that. I can't believe we did all of that, because we did some amazing things.
So from then till now, what's changed, or has it?
What's changed in terms of education. The system knows who we are and that we're there. I'm not saying that they're addressing our needs, but I'm saying they know who we are and they know we're there. We recognise what we need to do to a point. I'm not sure all of us is on board, but we definitely recognise what we need to do. In terms of education, we recognise that we now have to make sure that our children go through to university, are well trained, go to, as far as they can in terms of their education achievement. On the political front, we also recognise that we have to be part of that. We have to be part of the decision-making process, and to a point, we've done some work in there. Still got a long way to go. In whichever institution we look at, we still have a long way to go, but we have made a start, and a start is what's important, that we actually get through the door. In terms of community, I think that there has been a breakdown from our generation to the next generation, and I'm not sure why that is actually. I think because although we look at education as the way out, it's not necessarily always the way out, and we've not put enough emphasis on the other areas as a community. And therefore you don't have young people coming through to the organisation so they can carry on. I think also as a community we were too codependent on funding organisation to support us, and we didn't find our own roots in terms of self-determination or self-funding, and I think those are the areas that we've sort of fallen down on, but I think the young people coming through now are beginning to recognise that and are trying to look at ways of funding themselves so they can be more self-determined as opposed to always jump into the sound or the voice of somebody else. I think also the influence of this society has broken down our community, because I think we've not I don't know where we lost the voice to our young people, but we did lose the voice somewhere along the line, and as a result of that they've gone off in all sorts of directions, whether it's been the transition, and I think it's a transition, I have to say it's a transition, because each community goes through a development and it goes through a stage where you break down in order to break through, you break down to rebuild and all of that. And I think our community is going through that. A lot of people say our community is stagnant and we're not doing this and we're not doing that. But I think we are doing it on a level. We might not be doing it where, it's a big, massive thing as we normally do, but we're doing it slowly and putting it together slowly. So for me, there has been a breakdown. There really has been a breakdown. But, I don't look at that as being completely negative, because I think that in order to break through, sometimes it has to break down. But hopefully, with organisations that are still standing, because there is a number of black organisations in Derby that are still standing, and there are organisations that's still being created. So hopefully we'll bring young people through, or we will step aside, because I think also it's about us recognising that we need to step aside in order to let them through. We have difficulty in that, like everybody else, human beings we are. We have difficulty in it, but I think that is something we have to do to allow young people to take on the mantle and to and for us to support. It's not necessarily we have to step out. It's about stepping down in order to support those that needs to come through. So I think in terms of our community has changed. It It adds change. And as people become successful as individuals, that also has an impact on the community, because then they either step out of the community, and there's nothing wrong in stepping out of the community, but you must always remember what your community. I don't care if you're a multimillionaire, but still remember your community, because that's, always remember that. And I think that is what we need to drill through, and that's what we need to remember. No matter how successful you are, you're successful because of the village you come from. And therefore, you need to remember that. Don't forget that. And I think that's a voice that we need to be shouting again. I think that's a voice we need to be shouting again.
What could we actually do to bring that community and togetherness back to a certain degree? Do you think there was more togetherness in an earlier time than it is now, actually? Or?
Yes, I do. I think it was. Yeah, it was because I think everybody, because people felt that they weren't part of, they weren't included. I think because they felt that they weren't included, people tended to get together to support each other more. And it's like the church all coming together to support each other. But, now you've got like 50,000 churches all over the place. So everybody's in their little corner. But I think one of the things, especially for the African and Caribbean community, is that we have to get back to the point where we're actually talking, where we're actually having conversation, whether it's in some small groups, big groups, wherever it is, but we need to get back to the point where we're actually talking. Because we're very fragmented as a community. We're very fragmented as a community. And we need to go back to the very basic, and that was about talking to each other. We don't do enough talking to each other. We don't do that at all. We talk to each other in our little groups. We've got groups all over the place. We've got churches all over the place, and we're all talking there. But coming together, we don't do that enough. It's not like say for instance, if you look at the Muslim community, they have the mosque where everybody goes to and everything, and they can pull everybody together just through that forum there. We haven't got that, so we have to go back to our very, very basic things, where we used to have all that. We used to meet up around each other's houses. We used to do all of that before, and get together and talk. And I think that's the only way. We're going to have to get back to having discussions and having a talking shop. I remember in the early 80s, actually, we used to talk all the time. With the Rastafarian movement, we used to sit down and call it reasoning. We used to all come together to reason. Amazing, because you learned so much from that. And you knew what was going on with each other and everything else. We have to get back to reasoning sessions, whatever that means, whatever format that takes, whatever form that takes, we need to do that.
Regarding you leaving behind a legacy, if there was a space capsule created and we had to put things about Joyce in that capsule, what would be in there alongside probably any words that you might have as well?
Alongside any what would be in there? You could just go down the list and say, okay, she was involved in setting up a diary, a day centre, which I set up the day centre. Well, it wasn't just me. It was because nothing we do is just us. That's the truth. Nothing we do is just us. There's a lot of people involved in that process. But in 82, we set up the Adari Day Centre. And it got registered as a charity in 86. And that's been going now for 30 odd years, which I'm really, really proud of, actually. And I've worked with it now for a long, long time, about 20 odd years. Well, I did 20 odd years and then I left, and then I went into equalities and got involved in mentoring and setting up mentoring programs over in Staffordshire and stuff like that. And then I came back to it again in 2011. That's right, isn't it? Yeah, 2011. So you would say that would be one of my legacy. Also, I was involved in the development and forming of Adari Nari, which looks at supporting women fleeing domestic violence. Spent many years working with that group there, having developed it. Set up Mary C. Cole over in Burton-on-Trent. Again, it's a day centre addressing the needs of elderly people. I've set up projects all over the country and helped to set up and support that and support people. Just people, and it doesn't matter which people, it's just people. Whether you be black, white, Asian or whatever, you know, I've done all of that. And what else would I say? My children, actually, because I've got 4 children, and it's been not easy getting your children through and supporting them alongside all the community work and stuff that you do, because community work is very, very, it's self-sacrifice all the time. It's self-sacrifice all the time with community work. It's not easy at all. But with... I would say if there was a time capsule, just the fact that my children are all grown and survive me as a mother. I would say it's an achievement more than anything else, my children, because they've all done really well, and that I'm proud of. And I've now got 3 grandsons, which is amazing, absolutely amazing. So yes, I would say if any of that was to be a legacy, is the fact that I've done that. I've done that. I've done that. Yeah. I've taken things from its conception right to its birth and growth.
And who or what influences you? Could be people alive or dead, or
it's all sorts of things influence me. All sorts of things influence me, to be honest with you. My dad, my parents did an amazing job, because my mother is such a strong woman, and the things they had to go through when they came here in the 50s and stuff, amazing, and they still survive today. To tell you, and you know, all of our heroes, those that we know and those that we don't know, have influenced me. My children have influenced me. My community have influenced me. Just meeting people every day. There's a lot of things that's influenced me. There's no one thing that's influenced me. There's a whole host of things. You know, but I think also the biggest influence in my life really is trying to live a life, a good life, and the fact that your faith, that's what influences you. You know, the work that Jesus do and Jesus himself, that influences you a great deal to do the things that you do. But a lot of things have influenced me. I couldn't say in my life that there's any one major thing that's influenced me, because there's so many things that influence me. You know, I had a dog that taught me how to be patient. A dog taught me how to be patient. Gizmo, he was mad as a hatter, but he was the sweetest thing. But he taught me how to be patient. So there's all sorts of things that teaches you and influence you and changes you, and constantly are changing you, because you're constantly having to be reevaluating yourself. Do you know what I mean? You constantly have to be doing that, whether it's through books or whether it's through just meeting people, or whether it's just an animal, or whether it could be even a plant. You know, sometimes you watch the smallest of things and it's amazing how they all work together, and you think, God, look at that. You know, and that will influence you. So there's all sorts of things that influence me. You know, books, people, all sorts of things. Community is home.